Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar. I'm Kevin Aguano. I'm going to be your host. Today's topic is being a time-savvy project manager, and we're delighted to have with us Braden Johnson. Braden is a construction project manager with a lot of experience on institutional projects. He's also an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces in the Combat Engineer Regiment, which is awesome. He's a certified engineering technologist. He has his PMP, project management professional, and a master's in building science. This is one in a series of webinars that we run throughout the year. Um, Wherever you found out about this one, you can probably find out about the other ones that we have scheduled upcoming. They're all free and they all earn you PDUs or professional development units for continuing education credits and recertifications. Now, the way we're going to handle this, I'm going to turn you over to Braden in just a moment, and he'll do his presentation. While that's going on, you're going to come up with questions. I'm going to ask you to hold the questions till the end. Let Braden get through his presentation. At the end, we will leave time for Q&A. But just in case you forget your question, you're not going to remember it, I encourage you to type it into the web interface. If you're on the live session, there's a chat box and or a questions box that you can click. It depends on which browser you're using and whether you're on a cell phone or whether you're on a computer, what that looks like or which ones you have available to you. But please look for the chat box or the questions tab. And in there, you can type your question as you go. We'll hold on to them. And at the end, I'll give you a chance to ask those questions of Braden. But then we've got the list of questions that are there. Okay, so we'll take it. We'll hand it over to Braden now. Braden, take it away.
All right, thanks for that introduction, Kevin. And hello and welcome everyone to the presentation on being a time-savvy project manager. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to this. Often in working on projects, we're very accustomed to having spreadsheets, schedules, kind of tools that we use to manage our jobs from beginning to end, from planning, execution, control and monitoring, and closing our projects. But for this presentation, I wanted to take a little bit more of a higher level approach and focus on overall principles and strategies that's really helped me out in my career. And it aligns where I know a high level plan of how I want to manage my time and be very productive. And then I can adjust and be flexible with specifically how I get it done on each project. So I'm going to share that with you today. So of course, when we talk about time savviness, we want to discuss our efficient use of time. Some of the things that need to be understood, it's pretty clear, but I'll state it anyways. Time is a limited resource. We can only do a fixed amount of work within a given time period. And then efficiency is being able to produce the most output with the least amount of input. Efficiency is also knowing how to focus our effort on critical path deliverables. And I would say or argue that time savviness includes creating a team attitude that embraces efficient time usage. So not only if we want to be time savvy PMs, do we have to understand the finite world that we live in with work and time and energy, but as leaders, we have a special role in terms of creating that environment where everyone's working in that alignment and understanding as well. All right, so as project leaders, we have a key role to play in creating these team environments. All right, so a little bit about strategy and tactics. Some definitions here. Tactics refers to the specific action or methods used to achieve a particular goal or objective, especially in contexts such as military ops, sports, business, and other competitive environments. Tactics are usually short-term and focused on the implementation of a plan, helping to maneuver or position oneself or a group advantageously in relation to an opponent or a challenge. And of course, when we're working on projects, we're going to be encountering several challenges, both micro and macro. So that's our understanding of tactics. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I'm going to stay away from discussing detailed tactics. I'm going to focus more on strategy. So strategy refers to a high-level plan or set of guiding principles designed to achieve a long-term or overall goal. It involves determining the best way to allocate resources and make decisions to reach our desired outcomes. Unlike tactics, which are focused on short-term actions, strategy is concerned with the broader, more long-term vision and direction, often involving analysis, foresight, planning to navigate complex environments or challenges. Okay, so I would be remiss if I didn't reference one of my favorite books on strategy, which is The 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene, and it explores the concept of grand strategy as a comprehensive and long-term approach to achieving significant goals. Unlike short-term tactics, grand strategy involves thinking far ahead. It requires deep understanding of the broad context, understanding our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. For the PMs on the call, will be very familiar with that, our SWOT, as well as the motivations and movements of our opponents and competitors. So in the book, Robert Greene emphasizes that grand strategy is about making decisions that will have lasting impacts rather than just reacting to immediate situations. It involves crafting a vision where we want to lead and align our actions and resources to steadily move towards that vision. This may include building alliances, influencing perceptions, and carefully choosing when and where to engage specific actions or conflicts. So the introduction is just to kind of start off where what I'm going to try and suggest and recommend based on my experience, some really good strategies to maintain time savviness. And last here we have a quote from another one of my favorite books, Sun Tzu, Art of War. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. However, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So without further ado, let's get into some of these strategy suggestions that I've learned, and likely you have come across some of these strategies as well in your work experience. So here we go. Number one, no money, no work. If we're going to maintain being efficient with our time and effort working on projects, we understand that there's a series of dependables. One of them is very clearly is money. So in construction, we have purchase orders, we have contracts, we have agreements. When teams and individuals and trades complete work, they send invoices. As PMs, we review, we process, and we approve, and we keep the work flowing. In order to keep the work flowing, there has to be funds and money available. As PMs, we have to be very cognizant and wary of engaging other parties in work when those funds and the budget is not available. It seems very common sense, but I've seen this mistake countless times in my work experience, where due to pressures or eagerness or even ambition to start the work early and ahead of time, there isn't the due diligence made to actually ensure that budget and funding is captured and available prior to work starting. And then anybody who's familiar with contract law, if there's no contracts in place and work has been started and an inability to pay, then it could result in a lot of claims and downstream issues that will essentially stop our work from being completed. So without following this principle, you can very quickly find yourself in an inefficient work process, potential stop work, and not being very savvy with your time. So that's the understanding and strategy of we have to have our money in place before we get the work going. Next would be quid pro quo. That's Latin. Essentially, we never want to do actions or work for nothing. So, as I mentioned earlier before in the time savviness definitions and efficiency, we only have a limited amount of time and energy. As PMs, we can't afford to have ourselves or our teams go down paths of work that's not going to result in some type of tangible benefit for the project. So in order to make sure that we're maintaining time efficiency and savviness with ourselves and our team members and we're hitting our project goals, we have to make sure that every action that we do is going to be for a specific purpose. All right, here's one of my favorite ones, and I think you probably have come across this strategy many times. Whenever it comes to work on projects, especially actions that can result in consequences, we need to get those directions in writing. So as PMs, we need to formally give directions in writing. And then if we're receiving orders or instructions from seniors or executive management, we need to get that in writing. If we don't, and we just go off of verbal or casual anecdotal conversations, we could be caught in a scenario where we're proceeding with work that hasn't been formally authorized, and that could lead to a lot of downstream inefficiencies and potential stop work and conflicts. So an easy way to get around that is whenever we're receiving instructions or giving instructions that's going to result in work that can have consequences, get it formally in writing. And then that's the strategy. If we were to think about some of the tactics related to that, it's simple, proper construction contract administration. Our change orders, our SIs, our contemplated change notices. Sorry, those would be examples of tactics that fall under the strategy of get it in writing. Okay, another one. Number 4, know what liability means. All right, so if we want as project managers to be working in an efficient way, minimizing our inputs and maximizing our outputs, once we start work, we have to understand what we're ultimately going to be responsible for. And there's no difference between being responsible and liable. Responsible is we have to complete work. Liable is we are on the hook for the consequences if that work goes wrong. So whenever we assume responsibility, that also implies liability. We have to make sure that we have an understanding of what that work entails, both on the front end of being responsible and then also taking on the liability of downstream consequences, and ensure that we package that up into a total scope of work where we're managing those risks. And then that can be delegated to teams and individual trades and other parties so that we're not having any scope gaps. And then let's say if there is a negative consequence, we weren't able to properly foresee it, that can then result in either work stoppage, slowing down of deliverables, or conflicts and claims. So whenever we accept work, understand the responsibility, but also the liability, those two things are the same. So that's a strategy that's helped me out tremendously in projects. Next is keep yourself in question mode. And I'll be very straightforward to the point on this. Um, the simple understanding is as project managers, we are here to solve problems. In order to solve problems, we have to ask questions because all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. The moment we stop asking questions, we're no longer curious. We not only stop learning, but we also stop solving problems. So if we want to be efficient with our time and energy, minimizing inputs and maximizing outputs, we have to stay in that question mode to ensure that all problems are being solved in a timely manner. So that's a very important strategy to have. Number 6. Okay, this is an interesting one. Uh, Emotions should be used as tools to get results. So with this strategy, what I've learned is at certain parts of our project, there can be high pressure, high tense situations where things aren't going as we planned and frustration starts to build up. This can result in, often anger, kind of frustration, a little bit of despondency. And if not careful, that can come across and be communicated to our partners and our other stakeholders in a way that we didn't anticipate or we want to. And that could lead to inefficiencies, basically miscommunication, misunderstanding where work isn't being done as it should. So the idea behind emotions being used as tools is we shouldn't ignore when something is bothering us in projects, but really take a moment to understand clearly what it is that's causing us to be upset or frustrated, do a bit of a deep dive in terms of what that problem is, and then develop a solution for it, and then use that emotion instead to block answers and solutions to drive us and give us the energy to push through the task and see it to its successful completion. So rather than have those emotions block us from being effective, we want to use that once we have an answer and a solution to help motivate and drive ourselves and others towards successful completion. So in this way, we want to use our emotions in a positive way as well, as opposed to a negative way. And that will help us be a lot more savvy with our time and efficient with our work that we do on projects. All right, continuing down the path. Number 7, always think about the best way to do everything. So we want to be efficient with our work. If we want to be efficient with our work, that means we want to not have to solve a problem and then in the process of solving one problem, creating 3 more. That's not efficient. If we're thinking about the best way to do everything, whenever we come up with a solution, there's going to be no downstream problems afterwards. It sounds easy, but it actually takes a little bit of, I should say a little bit, it takes effort to understand how to do things in the best way. Because think of the different entities and stakeholders and individuals who are interested in the way that we do work on projects. We affect a lot of people, right? The most important people are going to be typically authorities having jurisdiction. We have to deal with laws, we have to deal with codes, and we have to deal with industry best practices and standards. So whenever we're thinking about the best way to do everything, we're taking all of those things into consideration prior to moving forward with actions. So what I've found is that whenever as a PM I'm working on projects, and either I'm able to understand what those important aspects are with regards to codes, laws, standards, best practices, or I have a team that is able to bring that into perspective. When we make our decisions and we're in alignment with those things, we typically are able to solve a problem without creating any more downstream. So that's the process and strategy of always thinking about the best way to do everything. And this can be for very large problems or very small ones. We should apply this strategy to everything. Next, know how to get others to do their best work. Okay, this is really where leadership skills come into play. Time savviness, time efficiency means we want everyone to be at 100% output. We want to avoid rework, errors, duplications, conflicts. So in order to get other people to do their best work, we have to kind of understand how they work and understand them as individuals. So this is establishing those relationships, knowing how to motivate others and motivate the team. So this is an important strategy to have. And if it's a toolkit which you're lacking in your tool belt as a project manager, you should immediately look into getting additional education training in terms of how to do team motivation and how to build those individual relationships so that your team members can be working at their best. Okay, the next one, do not take responsibility for something that is not under your control. So what I mean by this, we want to be efficient with our time. We don't want to have to produce work that's going to be done incorrectly or inefficiently or result in rework. And ultimately, too, we don't want to uh, ourselves or our teams to participate in work that's going to lead to frustration and conflicts. So to do this in the best way, we don't want to take responsibility, because remember what responsibility means? It also means liability for things, something that we can't control. If we do, then that means we are going to be on the hook for end results, which we didn't have any way to kind of shape or influence. That is a very quick way to get your team into a lot of problems and issues because you will be asked to solve problems in which you cannot possibly do. So practically, how we apply the strategy is as soon as a problem comes into our area of response, our area of awareness, as soon as we understand that it's not ours to control, we have to immediately delegate it or defer it or send it to the individuals or teams who have control of that item. If we leave it within our wheelhouse, we could potentially, slow the work, cause issues, cause conflicts. This is just recognizing things that we are responsible for, we take action for, and we control it. Things that we aren't, we immediately delegate it. We don't want that to stay in our wheelhouse. Okay, next strategy. seems pretty obvious, um, but it can't be reiterated enough. Do not lie to yourself on projects. So what does this mean? A strategy to have. So if we want to tell ourselves um, kind of stories about how things are happening on our project that don't align with facts, but we tell it to ourselves anyways because it makes us feel better. So it's like, yeah, we're delayed 3 weeks on delivery, but we can somehow make up for the installation somewhere down the line on the project, right? Or we are completely over budget, but there may be some way that we could potentially find savings down the road that can get us out of this situation. So that's an attitude and approach as PMs we can't afford to have. It's going to result in wasted time, wasted effort, and we're going to be creating more problems and not being very savvy with our time or energy. So what we want to do is align ourselves with the facts on the ground and then make decisions on the facts only, rather than telling ourselves stories that are contradictory to those facts. And even worse, sharing information that isn't accurate to other people who are dependent on us for completing their work. So the simple strategy here, and one that's easy for me and hopefully you to remember on projects: if you get the facts, stick with them, validate them, stay with that as the story that you're going to tell, as opposed to telling yourself something else that's going to make you feel better about the current situation. Whether it's good or bad, it's better to stick with the facts. Okay, another time savvy strategy is try and focus as best as we can on the results. So when focusing on the end result, it makes it a lot easier for our current present actions, and tasks and duties that we're carrying out will be more aligned with our end result. And that's typically going to be our key performance indicators, our performance milestones that we're trying to hit on behalf of our client or end users. If we have that at the forefront of our mind, it makes it much easier to stay on the same path and know that any action that we make or decision that we make heading towards that path, we're not going to have too much deviations to, outside of our goal and our objective. So always keep that end focus in mind as you're making present day decisions. That for me has been a very useful strategy to make sure that not only myself but my team is working in a time savvy manner, and we're doing our work in the most effective way possible. Okay, next strategy: logic and reason are not always effective. Okay, so Braden, what do you mean by that? Logic and reason are just logic and reason. They should always work. In my experience, no, it does not always work. Sometimes to convince, I shouldn't say convince, but uh, I'll get everyone in alignment with the end result you're trying to achieve. Facts and information aren't going to be enough to sway the individual towards being aligned with what you're doing. At times, you may have to use a little bit of motivational, emotional language to get people on board with what you're trying to do. So, an example of this is, let's say there's an emergency and you need immediate action. The way I would communicate to get immediate action wouldn't be explaining all the detailed facts of the matter. I would most likely focus on what are the negative repercussions that could potentially tap into emotional responses. So it could either be reputational risks, it could be potential harm to life safety of and the safety of individuals who are working on the site. These kind of aspects, if we want immediate responses from individuals, we're not going to get into an information data based explanation. We're more going to communicate on an emotional response way. So if we do not do X, then negative consequences Y or Z may be impacted. And by communicating that way, by getting people to be emotionally engaged in the negative and or positive consequences, that can be more effective sometimes than giving out a list of facts and information. So that's what I've experienced in the past. I'm not sure if you've gone through the similar um, item, but once I came up with that understanding, it gave me more tools to get alignment with my team than previously when I was just using or relying on information um, based data only. All right, continuing down the path. If you want to be time savvy, you have to know how to end conversations. And this is a funny one that I've come across. If we're really busy and we're doing deliverables, it's a bit of a balance. We want to engage in social activities with our team members, but at the same time understand that there's a balance between having a conversation to get to know someone, and then when we're taking time away from when we have to be critically working on items. It's almost I think there was kind of the old school ways open door policy. If you always have an open door policy to have conversations, that's great because you show that you're there and you're there to support your team and people who are working on the project with you. But if you're always giving your time to other people, you may not have the time to get the tasks done that you have to on the project, and that could be an inefficient use of time. So knowing how to end a conversation is essentially there should be windows when you have open doors and should be windows when you have closed doors so you can actually focus on the work that you need to get done. So that's a very helpful strategy that I've adopted, and it's proven to be very effective for me. Okay, next. If you do not know, find out. So a lot of times on projects, we will be asked questions, particularly PMs. We're in the lead role. We're asked questions because the assumption is that we know. We know these things because we have access to all the subject matter experts on the project. So whenever we're asked questions about the project, most times we should already know. But if we do not know, the best thing to do is just communicate, hey, I don't have that information at the moment. I will get it and get back to you. That's an efficient use of time. That's being time savvy. Ignoring the question and allowing time to pass before coming to a resolution is the opposite of that. So the only thing better that we can do than the scenario I just described, which is finding out, is if we already anticipate the questions that are going to be asked of us, either at meetings with executives, leadership, or meetings with clients, or meetings with customers, and gathering that information prior to the meeting. That's one step better. The next best is we're asked a question we don't know. We communicate, hey, we're not sure, but we're going to find out immediately and get back to you. That's a very proactive approach that you can have as a project manager, and it'll result in an excellent use of your time. Okay, going into step number 9, always have a reason why. So why I found on projects in terms of time efficiency and savviness is reminding the team of the purpose, why you're here and why you're doing work. It's one of the greatest alignment tools. So, for example, we have a project we're trying to achieve a build or some type of construction or some type of fit up, some kind of improvement. When we engage all of our various stakeholders, designers, trades, engineers, um, subject matter experts, they're all going to have a specific responsibility that they're going to focus on. What happens is that when everyone starts working at their individual kind of responsibilities, they start to lose, they may lose track of the main reason why we're here and what we're trying to produce results for and who we're producing it for. So as a PM, a great way to keep the team aligned is to constantly reiterate the reasons why you're doing this work and why we're all here in the first place. It'll help because when those individuals and teams go off to do their kind of own closed door work and their focus, they have that in mind and it's going to influence the decisions that they make. So it's going to be more aligned with the main project goals as opposed to, conflicting with. So having opportunities to reiterate the reasons why we're here as a PM is a very powerful strategy and tool to employ. Okay, next. Seems simple and straightforward, Rule 21, but I'm not sure if, if we always deploy this. So minimizing conflicts can be achieved best by just minimizing contact. So what do I mean by this? If there's groups or individuals who were not, for whatever reason, able to work with productively, constant conflicts, depending on the details of the situation, things can cool down really fast just by creating a little bit of time and space for the parties, allow the parties to kind of reflect, consider before re-engaging in a conversation. So an example of this is maybe if we're going through negotiations or going through considering changes in a project that's going to have, you know, positive impacts and negative impacts for some. If it's a contentious issue, allowing some time to pass before re-engaging the party in a conversation can be an effective strategy to ensure that we're not conflicting for a much longer period of time. So if we want to immediately um, minimize conflict, a simple strategy is just to minimize the contact that we have with those individuals or those teams that we're conflicting with, within reason. Of course, within reason, because we can't avoid, but we can minimize that conflict by minimizing the contact. Okay. Um, Rule 22 or step strategy 22. Know who you are working with. All right. So when working on projects, individuals, they're not robots. They have other priorities. They have other concerns. We're working with people, and people, even though we're here to solve problems, sometimes as individuals, we can potentially bring our problems into the work. So, as an effective PM who wants to ensure that our teams are working in an efficient way, we have to spend the time to know the people um, who we're interacting with and we're solving problems with. So, this can be through in-person meetings, telephone conversations, some type of socialization or soft talk, whatever you want to call it, water cooler talk, coffee time talk, lunches. The more we're able to gather information about the people that we're working with, kind of how they do their best work, how they like to have information presented to them, what kind of things cause them frustration, what kind of things make their life easier. And even we can ask these questions: how can I make your work easier? What is it that I can do for you to help you do your work better? This is all falls under the strategy of knowing who we're working with. And that's really how we get to generating high performance teams, is by knowing the individuals. All right, next strategy on the table is learn from everything. So it may sound cliche. We're not always going to be successful on our projects. We're going to encounter failures. It's just a fact of doing projects. There's going to be some situations where we completely miss the mark, and there's going to be errors made. So as a PM, project manager, we're in a leadership situation, and other people are going to be looking to us for guidance and direction and instructions. What we want to do from errors is not go immediately into the blame game. The first thing we should do is learn about it. How can we be better as a team? How can we continually improve so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over? And my attitude towards this and how I learned about this strategy, I actually would encourage to, if we are going to have failures or errors, let's do it fast and let's do it early. Let's learn from it quickly. And then that way it won't continue to drag us on as we start to get into the more a higher intensity cadence of our project, and especially as we're closing it out and we're handing it off to stakeholders. So at the very beginning, let's do those failures, let's kind of do those crash and learned lessons, incorporate it so that we continually get better. So within this strategy, simple but very powerful, to be time savvy and making sure that you're using your time and energy in an efficient way, we want to learn from everything. Okay, next on the list of strategies is only rely on what is effective. Okay, so what this entails as a strategy for project managers is not to be stuck with a specific way or routine of doing work. We have to be flexible. We have to be, you know, we all know this word, agile. Be willing to change on a dime, course correct very quickly if what we're doing is not effective. And we have to be able to continually change and adjust our approaches to doing work until we find something that is effective. If we don't have that ability, then it's like, you're trying to go through that brick wall, and rather than figuring out or looking for a door or an opening, or kind of going over, you just keep hitting that wall. We don't want to do that as PMs. It's a very poor strategy to be successful, and a very poor use of time and energy. What's better is that we look for alternate means and alternate ways to accomplish our goals that's going to be effective. Once we find out a process or procedure that works for ourselves and the team, we immediately adopt it as a principle and rely on it until it no longer becomes effective. And then that way we use it as long as it works. The moment it stops working, we change. So that's the strategy. Only rely on what's effective. All right, next you're probably wondering, oh my goodness, Braden, when are you going to end? There's lots of them. We can keep going, and we are going to keep going. This one is pay attention to patterns. All right, I think there's a saying. Oh, my memory. The best indicator of future events is you can rely on present, something like that. If we want to predict the future, then let's look at what's happening right now. Because what's happening right now and the results that we're getting right now, if we continue them, then we're most likely going to get similar results in the future. So, this is why, as a strategy, as PMs, we have to pay attention to patterns, pattern recognition. If we see patterns or the way that we do work that are effective, we're going to keep those. If we see patterns that are ineffective, leading to deviations outside of our accepted range of approval, if it's too far out, then that's a pattern that we can recognize and then do corrective action to bring within acceptable parameters. So we constantly have to be collecting data and information from our teams, from the job sites, from our stakeholders, from authorities having jurisdiction, understand the patterns and what leads to um, um, effective results, and then also be aware of those things that are going to lead to deficiencies. Eliminate patterns that lead to deficiencies, enhance and encourage patterns that lead to successful results. So just being aware of the patterns in our projects is a key strategy to have as a PM. Okay, here is an interesting one. We want to be time savvy. We want to um, get the best out of ourselves and the people that we're working with. But as mentioned before, um, people bring to projects their own problems and their own issues that we can't control, right? It's not going to be therapist sessions. It's things that individuals have to work out on their own. But in projects, we are forced, I guess, would say, to come together and figure out a way to work collaboratively towards uh, um, a successful end result. So what I've learned as a good strategy to have is if I'm not working the best with someone, or they're, let's say we're having conflicts, or whatever, I'm not going to spend my time and energy trying to think about, well, what's wrong with this person and this person needs to change. All I'm going to focus on is I'm going to I'm going to communicate to them in a way so they know how best to work with me. So if they're sending information to me that's not helpful, or it's being communicated in a way that doesn't allow me to do my job in the most effective way, then it's my responsibility and duty to say, hey, I understand that you've sent me this information or these instructions, but would make it much easier or more helpful for me to action these items is if it's done in this way instead. At least that's when I've done that. I'm not trying to change that person. I'm just very politely and professionally requesting that that person communicates or shares or works with me in a different way that allows me to work better. And then vice versa. I would also want other individuals to communicate how they best work to me, so that when I know that, I know how to get the best out of them and they know how to get the best out of me. So We're not trying to change them or what they do. We just want to focus on how they work with us and figure out the best ways to change those ways that we interact towards the project. So do not try and change the individuals, the people, just change the way that they work with us. I found that to be, sorry, an effective strategy on projects. All right, here we go. One of my favorite strategies. Above all, folks, project managers, managers of all kind out there, protect your time and energy. This is probably going to save you and ensure that you have a long career versus a very short, stressful, frustrating one. So, what does protect your time and energy mean as a strategy? Very simple. Understand what you're responsible for, because you're responsible for a few things, and understand what other people are responsible for. Do not take on others' responsibilities unnecessarily, because when you do, now you're spreading your energy out thin. You're not going to be effective and you're not going to be very savvy with your time. It's going to be more difficult to get focused results. So we want to, whenever we're tasked or asked to do something, first ask the questions. Am I responsible for it? If not, who is responsible for it? And if that's the case, then that task or work should be assigned to that individual because it's for their time and energy to work on, not mine or not my team's. So as PMs, we not only have to do this for ourselves, we also have to protect the time and energy of everybody on our team so they can continue to work effectively. All right, next, only make plans based on your present situation and current facts available. My goodness, this strategy, another one of my favorites, just because I see so many people make errors on this one. And the worst part is it's actually with good intention, but it's just misplaced good intention. For example, if a customer or client asks the question, when will this be done? When is the project going to be finished? In an effort to make that client happy or happy with us, we may say, oh, well, yes, we're going to have it done on time, right? And we may make these commitments even though the current facts on the ground and situation do not support that conclusion, i.e., late deliverables, i.e., over budget, lack of funding. There may be risks that we're currently sitting on that will that do not support a a future forecast. Therefore, we should only make future forecasts and plans based on the information that we know at this time. Because once we do, we can always communicate. It's reliable. That's essentially what it is. I'm only going to commit to something I know right now because I don't know in the future what I will or I won't have. If I make a commitment in the future thinking that something may or may not happen later on, then I'm decreasing my forecast reliability. And as a PM, we can't do this. We can't make inaccurate forecasts to stakeholders and clients. The main reason being because people are going to be dependent on our results being accurate. So it's best to make future plans based on what you currently have as facts at present. That will um, save you from a lot of time inefficiencies, stop work situations, claims, conflicts, etc. Very important strategy. Next, make it a habit. So I'll be very quick with this strategy. Essentially, when we figure out ways to be effective and efficient with our time and energy and our savviness on a project, we repeat those patterns consistently until the point that it's ingrained in our day-to-day behavior and we no longer have to actually think about what we're doing. It's automatic. So that's what make it a habit is. Try as much as possible to make effective processes and procedures a habit so it doesn't take your time and energy to actually do. You almost execute it without even thinking. It's like driving. Sometimes you'll have that feeling when you're driving and you get to your destination, but you don't even really remember how many left turns or right turns you made, like if you're driving from work to home. That's how we want our effective work to be. It's just automatic, autopilot. Next, always stay in the problem solving mode. This is connected to always stay in the questioning mode because all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers, but it more addresses the attitude. The strategy we want to have at all of our meetings is not blame game, is not looking for whose fault it is or why we're here and all of that kind of stuff. That's for like lessons learned and after the fact stuff. What we want to do when we're approached with an immediate risk in the meeting is concentrate our time and energy, and as well as our teams, to the fact that here's a problem. Let's use our collective intelligence and subject matter expertise to come to a quick solution that doesn't create any more problems. If we all have that attitude, we will be very effective with our time and energy. Meetings, which sometimes would take hours on end, we could probably get to solutions in a quarter of the time, just as everyone was able to stay in this mode, which is we're focusing on solving the problem and not creating them. Next, strategy 36. Commit your time and energy to constructive activity only. All right. As project managers, we are trying to build things. We're trying to solve problems. We are trying to improve efficiency. We are trying to enhance our team performance. We're trying to improve relationships. We're trying to maximize and get the most effective use of our communication. That's constructive. Non-constructive is everything that's the opposite of what I just said to that. So I don't have to go into all the opposites. You can kind of imagine what that is. So we want to be very constructive with our time. And if we become aware that we're no longer being constructive, we have to check our own behavior. And also, as project managers and leaders, be willing to check the behaviors of our team members in a professional and cordial way. So if someone is contributing in a non-constructive way, just do a light, kind of tap on the shoulder, a light nudge, just, hey, I understand what you're saying. You acknowledge, and then you try and steer it towards. However, perhaps a more constructive approach or problem solving approach is if we do XYZ instead of ABC. And that's a way that you can kind of guide your own actions and interactions, as well as steer and navigate the actions and interactions of your team members. All right. Oh my goodness. Strategy 38, expect and plan for the worst. This one okay. So I think a good comparison is most PMs will be familiar with estimating, optimistic, kind of uh, most likely, and pessimistic estimating. So depending on the situation, you may lean towards, most likely and optimistic, but as a PM, you always got to be prepared for the worst. Okay. It's better to be prepared for the worst and have the worst not occur than to only expect the best and have the worst occur. It's really that simple. So even if you're moving forward with an optimistic projection, you should, as a responsible, time savvy, efficient PM, still have in the back pocket a worst case plan response scenario ready to deploy. So we want to hope for the best, but we want to make our plans for the worst case scenarios. That's a strategy that I strongly recommend adopting as a project manager. All right, continuing on with the strategies, I think we're rounding off um, to the end of them. Another one of the classics, know how to say yes with conditions. All right, Braden, what do you mean when you say yes with conditions? Oh, okay. So with this strategy, as a PM, it may sound strange, but we are actually in the business of customer service, believe it or not. We are here to make our customers happy, and we're here to make our clients happy. We are not here to say no to our customers or say no to our clients. Whenever we're asked if we can move mountains and we can move oceans, the answer should not be no. The answer should be yes with conditions. A lot of times as a PM, this will be a very effective strategy to use because when you're able to communicate all of the conditions that you need to move heaven and earth, the person who originally asked you, when they realize all the conditions that are needed, will say no for you. So in that way, we don't say no to our clients. We don't say no to requests. We say, yes, this can happen. But in order for that to happen, all of these other things need to be lined up in place first. That is a very good strategy to have. And I highly recommend you adopt this into your day-to-day project management strategies as soon as possible. Knowing how to say yes, but just attaching to that yes all of the conditions that will be required and risks that will need to be managed. Okay, so I shared some of the strategies of how to be a project manager, time savviness. The idea again is that these were high level principles. And underneath those high level principles, there's going to be lots of individual tactics that you can use to satisfy those strategies. But the idea is if you're operating so you satisfy those strategies, you will more than likely be utilizing the most efficient ways to get work done, not only for yourself, but also the teams that you're working with on your projects. So thank you for your time. I really hope that you found this content interesting. And yes, if there's any questions, I think we have about 8 or so minutes left in the presentation to take those on.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Braden. I appreciate this. I learned a lot. It was a lovely presentation and so many points. When I thought you can't possibly be more, you kept going. You're an encyclopedia of knowledge. That's awesome. Okay, everybody, now's your chance to enter in some questions. We did have some questions typed in while Braden was presenting, but for those of you still on the call, you still have a chance. Type your questions into the chat window or the questions tab on your web interface. While you're doing that, we'll address some of the ones that were already entered in. So, Braden, the first one was from Doriana, who asks, isn't using emotions as tools being manipulative?
Interesting. Okay, so I'm not sure if Doriana listened to the explanation. The using emotions as tools is really our own emotions. So rather than being frustrated and angry and using that to stop our productivity, what we want to do is first acknowledge what's bothering us and then do a deep dive into what the problem is, and then using that emotional fuel to drive us through the solution so that we don't actually stop our own work progress, but we have the energy to push through to the answers and solve the problems. So it's not about other people's emotions, it's actually about our own.
Okay, excellent. Next question is a long one. It's from Ravi. Ravi says, you said don't take responsibility for something you don't control, but often we are forced to be responsible for the actions slash results of others who are not controlled by us. For example, when I am the responsible PM and some work is done by a partner over whom I have no power, what can I do?
Gotcha. All right. So great question. So with that, so ultimately, PMs, we are the leaders, right? And anything underneath our responsibility or our management, we have some degree of accountability. But even in that situation, there's clear roles in terms of who's fully responsible for carrying out the work versus who's responsible for overseeing. What we want to do is clearly identify who's responsible for completing the work and who's responsible for reviewing and overseeing. In that way, we don't want to take ownerships for tasks that we're not responsible for completing. That's it's just it doesn't work. It doesn't lead to understanding what the true source of a problem was. So that's the idea. We want to, in order to do root cause analysis in terms of why something went wrong, we need to understand who's clearly responsible for tasks. We maybe have an oversight responsibility, but that individual person or other group has task completion responsibility. We just want to know and be certain of the differences between those two when we're doing root cause analysis. So I hope that that makes sense. It's similar almost to like if we're doing quality assurance or even health and safety. So think about it as you have a health and safety inspector who comes in and reviews work. If there's a health and safety incident, is it the inspector's fault that that incident occurred? So it's similar with PMs. We have oversight responsibility and accountability to ensure that there's procedures that are being followed, but we're not actually responsible for those task actions themselves. Understanding those differences and then the consequences that result, we don't want to be responsible for those consequences. Don't do that. It doesn't make any sense. Hope that
Excellent.
answered that question.
Excellent. Thank you. Good answer. Next question is from, I guess this is pronounced Corey. Corey. The question is, um, what can you do to create a team attitude for efficiency when you work in a government environment?
Oof. I've worked in government environments. Um, yeah, I've worked in the federal environment. So, all right. The question was, what can we do to create um what was it a cult what was it, Kevin? A culture of time
It
efficient?
says,
I got the answer.
what can you do to create a team attitude for efficiency when you work in a government environment?
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm gonna ask Corey, what's the first team that you work with? And the answer to that, you're a team of one. It starts with you. You, your arms, your legs, your limbs, your thoughts, your actions, that's first team. So first, make first team efficient. Then it's like osmosis. It may take a long time, but because we're all reliant on each other and how we do work, your efficiency is inevitably going to spill over to the folks that you immediately work with. That's how we do it. So we don't think about, oh, I need to change the efficiency of 50 people overnight. Worry about how am I going to make myself and my own work efforts efficient. And then by proxy and by interaction over time, that will improve the efficiency of others who I immediately work with.
Excellent. Thank you. This is we're running out of time. This will be the final question. So thank you everybody for typing in all your questions. This will be the final question from Connor. Connor says, um, okay, so you made a statement. You said we only make plans based on the present and current facts. So he says, with that statement, what about scenario planning for dealing with risks or testing assumptions? That's where PMs can really bring in value. It is essential we have multiple plan Bs in our back pocket.
Gotcha. Okay. So I did reiterate. So forecasting scenarios is fine. But even in forecasting scenarios, now we're getting into the details. Let's say what I would argue is when we're doing a scenario, we base it off of what we have present. Our resources, our funding, our budget, our personnel, all of that, our know-how, our subject matter experts, what we have right now, we forecast based on what we have. If we're anticipating that additional resources will be provided in the future, what I'm saying is that that forecast becomes much less reliable. You just have to be aware of that. And if you're communicating a forecast to others that depends on future outcomes that may or may not occur, you should ascribe a certain percentage of reliability to that as well, just like estimating, right? So we don't want to give false expectations to people who are dependent on our results because they will take that and run with it. We have to be very careful how we do that. So that's why it's safer, it's better, and more effective to only make your forecast based on information that you currently have. You can never go wrong that way. So that's the reason behind that.
Okay, okay, excellent. So you're supportive of these plan Bs, having some backup plans in your pocket for different possible future outcomes.
For sure. It's just, if we're basing it off of information or resources or funds that we don't have, it becomes less reliable.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Everybody, that was our last question. We're up in time. We have just seconds left in our hour. Thank you very much for your time, Braden. We learned a lot.
Mhm.
Everybody, please remember this is one of a series of webinars that run every few weeks throughout the year. Please, wherever you found out about this one, look for others. There may be many more on topics that you're interested in, and all of the webinars are recorded and uploaded to the YouTube channel for procept.com. Please take a look for that. Thank you to our other sponsors. We had sponsors today from a couple PMI chapters, the Project Management Association of Canada, and one provincial engineering association. So thank you, everybody, for co-sponsoring this event. And thank you very much. Thank you, Braden.
Cheers, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Bye for now.